Now, these are difficult times, as we all know. We sort of hurtle from one interesting week to another. This week, we're told the markets are in free fall. I don't know whether you agree with my summation of what was just said there, but there's an awful lot of profiteering going on, it seems to me. I don't see this as a lack of confidence in the government.
Well, the markets are exceptionally volatile, and as you say, some big traders are taking very big positions. A lot of them went very short of the pound. Some of them have now got to close those positions out. Very interesting that in Asia overnight, the pound hit a low of $1.03. And yet this morning when I checked my television, it said it was $1.08.
Yes.
So we've had a 5-cent rally. So are they now going to write a story saying suddenly the markets are full of confidence in the government, having written the overnight story that it lacked confidence in the government? You're right. It's all absurd. It's exaggerated. Traders do what traders do. The markets are very volatile, and governments and central banks shouldn't react to every daily move.
I mean, I remember, because I was working in New York City at the time, when the last time it went down, I think it went down to something like 108. And I was being paid at that time in pounds, so it was a bit painful for me to see the parity practically getting there. But, you know, it was like that for a while, and it came back, and then pretty soon it was back to 150 and back to 175, and, you know, it never quite got back to 250 to the pound. But, you know, that's the way it goes, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the underlying reality, Mike, as you've been saying, is that as a result of the government's announcements on Wednesday and Friday last week, we're not going to have a long, deep recession of the kind we were staring in the face, because the government is giving us some of our money back. The government and the energy prices were taking far too much money out of our pockets and bank accounts, and the government was right to say this is overdone, this will create a big recession, so we need to see that off. So it's good news Wednesday and Friday that we're fighting recession now, and we're recognizing that people were in pain and businesses were going to go under because they couldn't afford these energy prices. What we now need to see from the government is the promised work, which they must bring forward as quickly as possible, to expand our capacity, increase the amount of energy we can produce for ourselves, to show how we can grow more of our own food, because we import too much. And that always leaves you a bit at risk to these currency speculators and wild markets.
Right. And it may well be that as a result of what's happening to the pound, that people actually do kind of have a look at all of that and go, do you know what, we should not be paying ludicrous amounts of money for things simply because of some currency traders in the City of London and in the Hong Kong exchanges and in Wall Street. You know, why don't we just grow our own food? And so maybe there will be a kind of, reconnection with all of that.
Yeah, I mean, if the pound stays this low, it's another really big incentive for people to set up businesses here, expand businesses here, to grow more food, to deal with those very expensive imports, because undoubtedly our imports are now dearer because the pound has fallen a bit.
Right.
And the other thing that people need to bear in mind is that there's been a massive sell-off, not just in the pound, but in most other major currencies against the dollar. Because the dollar interest rates are so much more attractive, and there's been a flood of money into dollars. And there's been a huge sell-off in government debt markets in most of the advanced countries because they're all sticking interest rates up.
Yeah.
And it is going to get dearer for governments to borrow as a result.
And do you expect the government to step in at some point? I was listening to Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning. She said to me just before I took over, surely Kwasi Kwarteng or Liz Truss will have to make some kind of statement today about what their intention is vis-à-vis the rest of the week if the pound continues to fall.
Well, I hope not. I think that would not be a good idea. As we've just been agreeing, markets do what markets want to do, and there are very big sums of money being traded both for and against the pound. We saw the ones against the pound winning overnight. We see the ones this morning in favour of the pound winning. They will play out their battles with these large sums of money they have in their investment banks. And I don't think providing a running commentary on it would be a good idea. And pretending you can control it would be a very silly idea as well.
Well, indeed.
The government needs to run a good economic policy, and the markets will, in due course, value our power more sensibly.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes whether we've become so kind of dependent upon government announcements that we kind of expect them all the time, because during Boris Johnson's reign, it seemed as though, obviously during COVID, there was a sort of government press conference every day. And I think people got kind of used to that. And I'm like you, I'd rather see government staying the hell away from all of us and just letting us get on with our lives, with our money, and letting them get on with the things that they're good at.
Well, indeed, most people in Britain still work in the private sector for competitive companies, and on the whole, they don't need governments telling them how to run their business or intervening.
Yeah.
Just occasionally, something goes so wrong in markets, as with the energy prices, that rightly the government has to do something. Incidentally, most of that was originally caused by politics, because it was a nasty war and an invasion, and the response to the invasion that caused the energy prices to go haywire. So it's appropriate for the government to respond. But the government shouldn't be daily intervening to say, oh dear, you've lost a little bit of money by buying some bonds, we're going to help you out. You have to take your rough with your smooth when you're buying financial assets, if that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely right. And as far as the budget itself, or the mini-budget, or whatever you want to call it, the fiscal event that took place on Friday, a lot of people remarked that the Tory backbenchers were quite quiet and sort of muted about it all, because they weren't quite sure, one, whether it was a good idea. They were all, depending on who you speak to, they were slightly taken aback by the scale of the tax cuts. Which sort of camp are you in on that, John?
Well, I was all in favour of the stimulus, as I was explaining, because I think we're fighting recession more than inflation. I do actually believe that the Bank of England has now got it right. I think they've done quite enough to bring price increases down next year and the year after. The Bank of England is forecasting back to 2% within 2 years. I think they will achieve that on current policy. So the last thing I want is them putting on more hair shirts and throttling the economy rather more. I think the mood on the backbenches was supportive by and large. There's a small group of people who supported Rishi Sunak who are not so keen on the policy. But when I went into the tea room afterwards to see what the chat was like, it was overwhelmingly in favour of the package. And I think maybe people were a bit taken aback by the fact that we got tax cuts on top of the ones we knew we were getting, because we obviously knew we were getting the corporation tax and the national insurance, because that had been a central feature of Liz's leadership campaign.
Absolutely right. And so as far as the next phase goes, I saw Kwasi Kwarteng interviewed over the weekend, as I'm sure you did. He says that there's going to be other government departments, other cabinet ministers coming forward to talk about their plans and how they will fund those. Yeah. Do you think this is a good start for him?
Yeah, I think it's a very good start. I think he's changed the debate. He's made people understand that we've got to do something different in this country to get the growth and prosperity we want. And it's always been about more and better paid jobs, but we weren't getting there quickly enough. And then we had to fight off this recessionary trend, which was digging in worldwide, led by America, having to slow her economy in a hurry with a massive increase in American interest rates. And that is a big shock to the system. And the UK was right to change the debate and say we've got to do better. And I think it will lead to good ideas in a number of departments. I think they're going to change agricultural policy so that it's more supportive of promoting homegrown food. They're obviously going to make big changes in energy policy, because we're far too dependent on imported energy when this country is potentially energy rich. And I look forward to those new investment projects to get out our own gas in bigger quantities, because however green you are, you have to accept that this decade, most people are going to heat their homes by gas, and most industries are going to use gas in their factories. Right. So why not produce it at home and save the money going abroad? Well,
we're going to be talking about this later on in the show, but as we've now found out today, the price of charging your electric car is practically the same now as actually putting petrol in it. So, you know, the advantage that people thought they were going to get from buying a green car and driving around in it feeling very smug appears to have disappeared. What do you make of Sir Keir Starmer's energy plans? He's unveiled yesterday a big new sort of proposal for Labour to go even more green than Boris Johnson wanted to do.
Well, I just don't think it's realistic to say that we will not be using gas and coal, fossil fuels to generate electricity this decade, because we're not going to get in place all of the things you would need to get in place in order to replace them with carbon-free generation. And if you want nuclear, nobody believes there could be a new nuclear power station commissioned today that will be in place before 2030. And in the meantime, we know that most of our nuclear power stations currently running are actually going to close down because they're old and they will run out of safety certification. And so we'll actually be generating less nuclear at the end of the decade rather than more. And if you want to rely much more on wind, you've got to put in battery storage, hydrogen storage, some form of storage, because otherwise, what's the point of relying entirely on wind? There's lots of wind turbines, because you'll get wind-free days and then you'll have no power.
Yeah.
So I think the danger of the Labour policy is it would be the blackout policy.
Well, I mean, we're already seeing, aren't we, that they're having rolling blackouts in California because of all the problems they've got with the number of cars that are electric and the number of people that want to use electricity. And so it seems obvious to me that the thing that technologically we should be looking at, if they want to go down that road, is, as you say, how the hell do you store it? I'm amazed that we haven't really got a decent way of storing electricity in this day and age.
Yeah, and that's the big challenge, and it's got to be a commercial way of doing it. There are various experiments going on with conversion of green electricity into hydrogen, which you can store, or conversion into battery stored power, or you could put in more pump storage systems. But these things all take time, and they're not yet being rolled out commercially. They all need subsidy and public support. So we're not talking anytime soon. So in the meantime, the reality is that most people in this country have gas boilers. Most people have petrol and diesel cars. We've got quite a lot of oil and gas under our feet or out in the North Sea in particular. And we need to get more of it out so that then we have more available domestically. It actually generates less CO2 to use your own gas than to import it in LNG form.
Yeah.
And it's an awful lot cheaper on the taxpayer because, of course, we get all the tax revenues on the oil and gas we produce at home, whereas all the tax revenues go abroad if you import it. So it's a no-brainer, and it would create a lot more better paid jobs in the process. So let's get on with it, and it's such a pity the opposition parties don't want to support our domestic oil and gas industry.
Yes, isn't it a shame? But the other thing that's a shame is that we've had to get to this point, John, where sort of seemingly nothing much has been done to prepare us for this point in history. You know, that we've kind of neglected our own fossil fuels because it's been the wrong thing to do. We did away with the gas storage systems we had in the North Sea. You know, we've, as you say, allowed ourselves to become far too dependent on foreign energy companies. I mean, how did it happen? I mean, was it people just not paying attention? What was going on? Because you've been in government during those periods, on and off. You've been in government many times. What's been happening?
Well, it was a combination of quite a lot of people in around British government and the heads of all the major parties who really wanted Britain to drive net zero forward. And so they thought relying on imports was the quickest way of doing it. And the Europe-wide policy, which we had to follow up until 2020, which encouraged all that. It was very much built around net zero. It was built around importing rather than producing your own. And it was pretty negative on anything that involved fossil fuels with extra carbon taxes imposed. And Britain followed that to the letter. And so we got to the point where we did need to import electricity and lots of gas from other parts of Europe in order to survive. And then suddenly we realize now, rather late in the day, that Europe itself doesn't have very much energy, and it was actually relying on Russian gas and Russian coal. And that wasn't a good look. And so now we've got to catch up, and we can do more than most of the continent because we still got some oil and gas and coal which we could actually get out.
But how soon can we get it out, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I mean, starting now, gradually it builds up, doesn't it? The easiest thing to do is to get a bit more gas out of a gas field where you've already made an investment. And then the next easiest thing is to put some extra wells in to an existing investment. And then the next thing you can do is there are some new fields quite close to old fields. So you can drill holes in those and link them in to production capabilities that are already there on the old fields. And then if you want a brand new field, then it's several years, obviously, before you can drill holes and put in the necessary production capacity. So you've got to build it up gradually. And if you do find some onshore gas, and there is some out there which people would be happy to see exploited, that's a lot quicker. So it's a lot easier to cap a well neatly and quietly in the countryside than it is with many hundreds of feet of water above you.
No, quite. Let's talk a bit about immigration. We've got Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng saying that there may need to be some kind of new immigration deal offered to certain countries to bring people in to work in certain businesses. There's a bit of opposition here from Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, and, of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg. What do you think?
Well, I think the compromise position is that we welcome in people of talent and with special skills that we need. and you can best judge that both by qualifications and or by amounts of pay they would immediately command. But we work away much more at ensuring all the other jobs are available for the people already here who are on benefits, who need a bit of help, a bit of mentoring, maybe a bit of support in order to take those jobs on. And some of those not so interesting jobs should be replaced with investment. And I think the cheap labour model, which we were using when we were in the EU, was not a good one. It meant that people didn't invest in labour-saving machinery. They got in people to do jobs at wages British people wouldn't accept. And it may have been cheap for the company, but it wasn't cheap for the state, because, of course, for every person you invite in on a low wage, the state needs to provide housing and school places and health facilities and benefit top-ups of income and all the rest of it. So it was very expensive for the state. So I hope we won't be going back down that route.
Yeah, indeed. And also, we were all expecting Suella Braverman to have something to say about the migrant crossings that are still going on from Calais, 30,000 plus already, and it's not even the end of September. She really needs to get to grips with that, doesn't she?
Well, I think she will. I think she's a brilliant lady. She's a skilled lawyer, which you need to be to cut through. The previous Home Secretary was very keen to sort it out, as keen as you and I have been. But she was constantly thwarted by clever lawyers who found ways around the system. I think Suella Braverman will have the extra legal expertise in order to change the law in the way we need to do. And my understanding is she's pressing on with that as quickly as possible and expect an announcement soon, and the sooner the better.
Yeah, absolutely right. Final word, Sir John. Do you expect to see the pound bouncing back properly in about a week's time? Sorry,
do I expect to
see the pound bouncing back properly?
Well, it may well do, Mike. I mean, it's bounced beautifully this morning, as I told your viewers earlier. It's gone from 103 to 108, just like that.
Yes.
But it will go up and down because big sums of money are moving as people try to make money. And when the people selling the pound have sold too much of it, they are then in great danger of losing a load of money, because then some buying can squeeze them. And I look forward to that.
Well, that's it, you see, because if you'd bought it at 103, you'd now be sitting on a great big pile of money, having sold it at 108. You know, that's the way it goes. But thank you, Sir John Redwood. Thank you very much indeed, Conservative MP for Wokingham.